The day I found out what my son had done, I was standing in the kitchen making coffee. That's how ordinary it was. The sun was coming through the window above the sink. The coffee maker was gurgling, and the phone on the counter lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer it. "Mr. Alderman," the woman said. "This is Patricia Oakes from Lakeview Title Company. I'm calling because we received a request to initiate a property transfer on your behalf. I just wanted to confirm a few details before we proceed." I set the mug down. "I'm sorry," I said. "A transfer of what property?" There was a pause on her end. The kind of pause that tells you something has already gone very wrong. "Your home, sir, 4112 Birchwood Drive. The request came through with a signed power of attorney dated last October." I hadn't signed anything in October. I hadn't signed anything at all. But I knew exactly who had. Let me back up, because you need to understand how we got there. How a man can raise a son, love that son, open his home to that son, and still end up standing in his own kitchen feeling like a stranger in his own life. My name is Owen Alderman. I'm 67 years old. I spent 31 years as a civil engineer for the county, built roads and drainage systems and a couple of bridges that are still standing. My wife June and I raised 2 boys in that house on Birchwood Drive. We planted the oak tree in the backyard ourselves, the summer after we moved in. June painted the front door red because she said it was the friendliest color. She died 4 years ago, quietly in her sleep, the way she deserved to go. And after that, it was just me in the house, and the red front door, and the oak tree that had gotten too tall to climb. My younger son, Patrick, lives in Denver with his family. We talk every couple of weeks. He offered to have me come stay with him after June passed, but I told him I needed to be home for a while. That was honest. My older son, Brendan, called me 2 months after the funeral and said he and his wife, Cassie, were going through a rough patch financially. Could they stay with me for a little while? Just until they got back on their feet. I said yes. Of course I said yes. He's my son. That was 3 years ago. In the beginning, it wasn't bad. Cassie cooked dinner sometimes. Brendan helped me fix a leak under the bathroom sink. We watched football on Sundays. It felt like family. It felt like the house had life in it again after being so quiet. But somewhere around the 8-month mark, things started to shift. I noticed it in small ways first. Brendan started handling the mail. He said it was easier since he was home more than I was. I didn't think much of it. Then he offered to manage the utility accounts online, to save me the hassle. I was never comfortable with the websites, so again, I let him. He started paying for groceries with a credit card he said was tied to a household account he'd set up to keep things organized. I didn't ask enough questions. That's on me. By the second year, I had very little visibility into what was happening with my own finances. My Social Security and pension deposits still showed up, and Brendan had started asking me to sign over a portion each month for household expenses. I trusted him. He was my son. I thought I was helping. It was my daughter-in-law, Cassie, who started making me feel like a guest in my own home. She rearranged the living room furniture without asking me. When I moved my armchair back to where I liked it, near the window, she moved it again 2 days later. She made comments about my lifestyle. I liked to stay up late reading. I didn't always make my bed. I used the kitchen at odd hours. She started a passive campaign of sighing and closed doors and conversations that stopped when I walked into the room. I'd hear them talking at night, their voices low and flat. I couldn't make out the words, but I could feel the temperature of them. One evening in March, I came downstairs for a glass of water around 11 o'clock. Their bedroom door was cracked open. I wasn't trying to listen. I just heard. Cassie was saying, "The county has programs, Brendan, memory care, assisted living. He qualify based on income. We could have him evaluated." Brendan said, "He's not going to want to." She said, "He doesn't have to want to." I stood in the hallway for a long moment, bare feet on the hardwood, the dark house around me. Then I went and got my glass of water and went back upstairs. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought about June. I thought about what she would have said. I thought about the fact that I had never Not once in 67 years felt afraid in my own home, until that night. The next morning, I called Patrick. He answered on the second ring. I told him everything. The finances, the furniture, the conversation I'd overheard. He was quiet while I talked. When I finished, he said, "Dad, how long has this been going on?" "Longer than I admitted to myself," I said. "Okay," he said. "Don't do anything yet. Let me make some calls." I want to tell you exactly what Patrick helped me understand over the next several weeks, because it matters. He connected me with a friend of his, an estate attorney named Howard Finch, who had handled situations like mine before. Elder financial abuse is more common than most people know, Howard told me. Family members are the perpetrators the vast majority of the time. The key is documentation and timing. Howard asked me to quietly gather everything I could. Bank statements, any documents Brendan had asked me to sign, the household account records, anything. I spent 2 weeks moving carefully through my own house like I was afraid of waking someone up. Which I was. What I found was worse than I'd expected. Brendan had set up a joint account in both our names, with my signature, which I did remember signing, though he told me it was for emergency household access. Over 16 months, he had transferred just over $41,000 from my accounts into that joint account, and then into an account solely in his name. He had also somehow obtained a power of attorney document bearing my signature. Howard looked at it and said the signature was close, but not right. A forensic document examiner confirmed it later. My signature had been traced from another document. He had also, as Patricia from Lakeview Title would later tell me, attempted to initiate a sale of my home. Howard's advice was clear. Do not confront Brendan. Do not let him know what I knew. File a police report documenting the financial fraud. Work with the bank to freeze the joint account and reverse what transfers we could, and move quickly on the house. The good news, Howard said, is that a forged power of attorney is void. He has no legal authority over this property, but we need to make sure he can't get a second bite at the apple. I want to tell you that I hesitated, that some part of me hoped there was an explanation, that maybe I'd misunderstood something, that maybe this was all a terrible mistake. But I'd heard Cassie's voice in the dark hallway. He doesn't have to want to. I didn't hesitate for long. Howard connected me with a detective at the county sheriff's office, a patient, methodical man named Detective Carver who had worked financial crimes for over a decade. I gave him everything, the bank records, the forged document, the title company call. He told me to continue acting normal at home. Don't change routines. Don't give them any sign. I went home that afternoon and watched Brendan make himself a sandwich in my kitchen, and I sat at the table and we talked about the weather. He asked if I was feeling okay, said I seemed tired. I told him I hadn't been sleeping well. That was true. Over the following 3 weeks, the bank worked with Howard to recover $37,000 of the $41,000 Brendan had moved. The remaining $4,000 had already been spent. The bank filed a suspicious activity report. Detective Carver's office prepared to move. Howard drafted a formal notice revoking any and all power of attorney arrangements and had it notarized and filed with the county. On a Thursday morning in April, I woke up early. I got dressed. I drove myself to the diner 2 miles away and had scrambled eggs and coffee and read the newspaper like it was any other morning. While I was sitting there, Detective Carver and another officer were at 4412 Birchwood Drive. I got a call from Carver at 9:47. "It's done," he said. "They're in custody. Both of them." I looked out the diner window at the parking lot, at the ordinary April morning, at a woman loading groceries into her car. I thanked him. I drank the rest of my coffee. When I got home, the police cars were gone. The house was quiet. My armchair was back where Cassie had moved it, near the doorway instead of the window. I moved it back. Then I called Patrick. The legal process took several months. Brendan's attorney tried to argue that the financial transfers were a misunderstanding, a family arrangement that I had consented to informally. The forensic document examiner's report on the forged power of attorney made that argument very difficult to sustain. In the end, Brendan and Cassie accepted a plea agreement, restitution of the full amount recovered, supervised probation for 3 years, no contact with me except through attorneys. I won't tell you that didn't hurt. It hurt in a way I don't have clean words for. This was my son. I used to carry him on my shoulders when he was small. I used to watch him sleep when he was a baby, the way you do when you can't believe something so small as yours. But I also remembered standing in the dark hallway, barefoot on the hardwood, hearing those words. He doesn't have to want to. Some things you can't come back from. Some lines don't get uncrossed. Patrick flew in the week after everything settled. He helped me repaint the front door. It had faded over the years, and June would have wanted it proper red, not the dull rust it had become. We did it on a Saturday, the two of us, in old clothes with the radio on. The neighbor's dog kept coming over to investigate. We were out there half the day. When we finished, Patrick stood back and looked at it. He said, "Mom would like that." I said, "Yeah, she would." There's something I want to say to anyone who might be in the situation I was in, or something close to it. Something I wish someone had said to me earlier. You are allowed to protect yourself. That is not cruelty. That is not betrayal. When someone in your own family, someone you fed, someone you loved, someone you let into your home, makes the choice to take from you what isn't theirs, the responsibility for what happens next belongs to them, not to you. I spent a long time in that house feeling confused and diminished and vaguely ashamed, as if the way my son treated me was a reflection of something I had done wrong. It wasn't. It was a reflection of who he chose to become. Those are different things. My house on Birchwood Drive is mine. The red front door is fresh. The oak tree in the backyard is enormous now, taller than the roofline, full of birds in the morning. I sit on the back porch some evenings with coffee and I listen to them. Patrick calls twice a week now instead of every other week. He doesn't say why, and I don't ask. I'm grateful for it. Last month I started volunteering 2 mornings a week at the county library, helping older adults with computer basics. One of the women in the group reminded me a little of June, same way of laughing at her own mistakes, same straightforward dignity. We've had coffee twice now after the session ends. Life keeps going. That's the thing nobody tells you when everything falls apart. Life keeps going, and if you let it, it carries you somewhere you didn't expect to end up. I didn't expect to end up here, sitting on my porch, listening to birds in a tree I planted 40 years ago with the woman I loved. Feeling, for the first time in a long time, like this house is mine again. Quiet, ordinary, mine. I keep coming back to that moment in the hallway. Barefoot on the hardwood. The house dark around me. Hearing my daughter-in-law's voice through a cracked door say that I didn't have to want something for it to be done to me. People ask me sometimes, when I tell this story, whether I feel angry, and the honest answer is that I don't, not anymore. What I feel is something closer to clarity, like a window that's been fogged over for a long time finally got wiped clean. What happened to me didn't happen because Brendan is a monster. It happened because he made a series of choices, each one a little smaller and easier to justify than the last, until the person he'd become wasn't someone I recognized. That's how it usually goes. Nobody wakes up one morning and decides to forge their father's signature. They get there gradually, trade by trade, one rationalization at a time. And the consequence came the same way. Gradually, steadily, until there was no avoiding it. What you build in the dark has a way of coming into the light eventually. That's not a religious idea. That's just how cause and effect works when you're dealing with paper trails and title companies and forensic document examiners. What I wish I'd understood sooner is that protecting yourself is an act of integrity, not selfishness. I spent 2 years in my own home feeling vaguely ashamed, as if the situation were somehow my fault, as if being trusting made me complicit. It didn't. Trust is not a character flaw. Refusing to see what's in front of you is. And the moment I stopped refusing, the moment I called Patrick and said the words out loud, everything changed. Not because the problem got smaller, because I finally decided to use my head instead of just my heart. That took something, Joe. I'm not going to pretend it was easy to move through my own house like I was invisible, gathering documents, acting normal at the dinner table, watching Brendan make a sandwich and talk about the weather while I knew what I knew. There were mornings I didn't want to get up. There were nights I sat in June's chair by the window and wondered if it would be simpler to just let them have it. The house, the money, all of it. Just walk away. But I didn't, and I think that matters. Not because I won something, but because giving up would have meant agreeing that I was already what they wanted to make me. Someone without say. Someone who doesn't have to want to. I wasn't willing to be that. Owen Alderman, 67 years old, retired civil engineer, widower, father of 2. I was still here. Still capable of reading a bank statement, hiring an attorney, sitting across from a detective and laying out the facts. Still capable of protecting what June and I built together over 40 years. That's what I want anyone in a situation like mine to hold on to. Not bitterness, not revenge. Just the quiet knowledge that your mind still works, your voice still counts, and the people who are counting on you to roll over may be very badly mistaken about who you are. The oak tree in the backyard is full of birds this time of year. I can hear them from the porch before I even open my eyes in the morning. June picked that tree out of a catalog in 1987. She said she wanted something that would outlast us both. She was right about that. Like, she was right about most things.